Welcome to That VidBlaster Guy. Glad you could carve out some time and take a look-see. I'm glad to have you with us today. It's going to be an interesting show. We've got kind of a different format for the show today. We're going to split the show into two shows. So we got two 30-minute shows today, and they'll actually, if you're watching us live, there's going to be an intermission in between. So we'll be passing out popcorn and candy bars at the intermission. Ought to be interesting. I'm Tom Sinclair, that VidBlaster guy, and the idea is that one guy with one PC can do an awesome broadcast. You don't need a whole room full of PCs to pull it off. It can be done with one PC. Now, that PC has to be carefully configured, has to be tuned. You know, we're talking about a lot of horsepower needed here, but it can be done. So if you're thinking, oh, I've got a passion, I've got a client. This is a great example. I've got a client in New York who, he wasn't a client, he was just a viewer. And he called and he said, Tom, I want to teach people how to make shoes. I really have a passion for that, and I think I can do it, and I'm going to monetize it. That is, they're going to subscribe, and they're going to get to watch me teach them how to make shoes live or recorded on the internet. But I don't want to, I'm not a tech guy. I don't want to get into a room full of computers. That's not my intent. My intent is to concentrate on my passion. And I said, have I got software for you? And VidBlaster's number one strength, at least the strength that people notice first, and I certainly noticed first, is it's easy to use. It's easy to set up. It does what you think it'll do. And most everything is out there where you can see it. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of folks in the world, and I tend to divide them into two different categories. Category one being my category, which is if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. You know, it just, and if you look at my desk, everything is in stacks because I want it all out where I can see it. If I put something in the file cabinet, it ceases to exist. It has gone. I don't know where it is. It could be anywhere. It's just not the way my brain works. I'm a very visual person. I want to see everything at one time if I possibly can. And then there are folks that I think are much better organized and probably a lot brighter than I am that don't have to see it all. They can know that it's filed alphabetically in the file cabinet just like it belongs. Well, if you're in that first category, you're going to love VidBlaster. Absolutely, because it lays it all out there. You take your mouse, you click on a camera, that camera comes on. Hey, that's pretty cool. That's pretty easy. You want to put in a lower third, you click something else and poof, that lower third appears. You want to show a video, you click the video thing, and you can even program it where it'll start the video when you click the video. It's called play on take. It's easy to use, and that is one of VidBlaster's greatest strengths. So we want to capitalize on that strength. And one of the ways to kind of keep that strength strong, at least from my perspective, is to say one man, one PC, one awesome software, one great broadcast. So that's my way of introducing VidBlaster today. By the way, full disclosure, I'm a VidBlaster reseller. I make a commission on VidBlaster when I sell it through my website. You can go buy it through vidblaster.com, and that's great. By all means, they're a big plus. They're the mothership. And you get your support from the mothership, from the VidBlaster forum, forum.vidblaster.com. But if you buy it from me, you get support from me and the forum. You get my cell number. You get, well, I'm sorry, this is turning into a big commercial. That's not what I intended. So VidBlaster is a great software, especially if you're just starting out. There's a $200 version called the home version that'll get you going, and then you can upgrade later as you need to. A piece of VidBlaster news, and this is pretty exciting stuff. We had rumors last year, 2013, but in the last 6 days, virtually all of 2014, I have seen tweets and Facebook posts that VidBlaster will begin the process of writing itself so that a Mac can understand it. Yes, VidBlaster will have a Mac version, an Apple Macintosh version. I don't know why, but no, I'm sorry, I'm not an Apple guy. I don't mean to demean anybody that is an Apple guy. That's great. But VidBlaster is going to come out. Now, how long will it take? Don't know. How long will it be before we see a beta? Don't know. We'll just have to wait and see as that rolls out. But if you're a Mac guy, or if you like Macs, or if you got a friend that has a Mac, and you're interested in that, you may want to get in on the beta end of it so that you can help out and be a part of the process. Gonna be pretty cool. Gonna be pretty cool. And that's been I'd say probably 1 out of every 10 phone calls I get about VidBlaster will get into the conversation, and then folks will say, "Will it run on a Mac?" And I say, "Well, yeah, but not really. I mean, it'll run on your Mac if your Mac will run Windows. How about that?" It's Windows software. It's not OS software. So it will be interesting to see, and that'll be a lot of fun to get that out and have the whole world see it. And that's an interesting difference with VidBlaster that I've really enjoyed, is that you kind of get the behind-the-scenes look at what's going on. Yeah, you get the release version. If you go to vidblaster.com and you want to download the software in order to test it, that's called the trial edition. You'll get the latest official release if you do that. But anybody that wants to can go to the VidBlaster forum, forum.vidblaster.com, and download the latest beta and play with it like a beta tester. You get to see things that are not official yet, but have been released to the public so the public can try them out and test them and see, hey, is this going to work? Was this a good idea? Is there a bug in it? Good example, version 3.20, which was released a couple of weeks ago, that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. It has a great new feature called multi-channel audio output. And the bottom line was it may have worked, but it fouled up some other things at the same time. In fact, we were going to do a show on it a couple of weeks ago, and I loaded it up and was testing and realized that the player bombed out. It wouldn't work in the player. So we didn't get to do that show, and we didn't get to test it and show it to you guys. But a new beta has come out, version 3.21, which is what I'm using today. And it seems to have fixed that problem very nicely. So we'll talk some more about that. But having the betas out there to play with, I mean, you can go back, I think, all the way to the beginning of the version 3s, and see the progression in version 3. You can look on the forum and see the progression in version 1 and version 2, although those betas are no longer available. I mean, if you want one of those to play with, I probably have them stuffed in a drawer somewhere. Well, probably not in a drawer, probably on a desktop. But if you'd like them, let me know, and I'll shoot you one. You can play with it and see the improvements since then. Let's see, VidBlaster. Yeah, talking about the ease of use for VidBlaster and how VidBlaster compares to other software. Now, when I started my look for VidBlaster, I got into this by way of sports broadcasting. I'd always done photography of my son's soccer matches and was beginning to do video, had put up a website for the soccer team and was bringing all that out there, and folks really enjoyed it. Parents and players and former players who had moved away could kind of keep up with the team through that. And that was really cool, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to do that live and do live video? And long story short, yes, was able to do that, and VidBlaster was the first piece of software I found. I didn't have the right keywords, I guess. I didn't know. And then since that, have discovered that VidBlaster has, let's don't call it competition, let's call them colleagues. Has some collegial friends in that same software genre, primarily Wirecast by a company called Telestream, and then vMix. Wirecast is out of, I think it's out of the U.S., and vMix is out of Australia. And there's some other lesser known, less common software programs, what we would call software switchers generically. and they have they have different features, they have different structures, they do things different ways. It's kind of interesting the way they were put up, because I think they all came in, they were birthed, and then they grew up a little bit and kind of came into maturity independently of each other. Those three in particular. Well, really Wirecast and VidBlaster kind of grew up independently of each other with two very different concepts of how it should work. VidBlaster with the open concept, that is, everything is out there for you to see. All your overlays and your players, that is your video players, your audio players, your effects modules, your cameras, the switcher. I'm looking at all the different modules that I use across here, the still store module, the output module. All of those things were out there, and they were the brainchild of VidBlaster's creator, Mike Versteeg. Now, Mike is a programmer by trade, but I don't think he was a video guy. I don't think he was a TV guy by trade. He just sort of cooked it up without preconceived notions of how it should work. And with that came a lot of strength, came some weaknesses, because it didn't think the way people who were in the TV broadcast industry, what their common thought was. It did it differently. And in some ways, I think it did it better because it was a fresh concept. It was not necessarily colored so much by how things used to be done. You come into a company and you try to do something different, and people say, "Oh, that's not the way we do it here." That's not the way we do it here. Well, Mike wasn't bound like that, so his imagination just went wild, and he came up with this great, visually appealing, easy-to-use software. Telestream bought the rights to Wirecast. I'm not sure who they bought it from, but it was Wirecast, I think, originally was sort of rooted in a Photoshop type situation. It was kind of like Photoshop for live video. And so you had layers and things built upon themselves, and there was a lot of complexity into it. So for a new user, or somebody that wanted to try to learn how to use it, it was the file cabinet thought, where everything is in a file cabinet. You got to go look for it and find it, and it wasn't particularly intuitive. And that continued on until the release of Wirecast 5 last fall, early winter, when Wirecast became a little bit more VidBlaster-like. I thought that was very interesting, with the ability to see out there all the different, they don't call them modules, but whatever they call them in Wirecast, so that you could begin to use it in that way. Well, it turns out that Wirecast and VidBlaster, with this approach of being able to see a lot of things, is really kind of modeled after something called TriCaster, which is a hardware/software solution. Very expensive. I think they've got one now that's under $5,000, like $4,995. But it's a computer, essentially, a custom computer, and you plug your audio sources into it, you plug your video sources into it, and I guess you have to get a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, that kind of thing. And it comes, or you can get a control surface with it that has lots of dedicated buttons and a T-bar, and I think that's a couple $1,000s. So you can spend $8,000 or $9,000 just to get things. Oh, and that doesn't include cameras. So that's not the way most of us are able to do it. That's, if you're a school and you want to put in a TV production class, you might start there. If you are a video company and you want to move into live video, you would probably start there. But if you're somebody with a passion and you want to do this on your own, you're probably going to have to start with the equipment that you've got on hand: a PC, a camera. If you come from a music background, you might have a mixer laying around somewhere, some microphones, something like that. And you kind of cobble it together, at least to see if it's going to work and see if it's going to be something that's worth your time and trouble. It might be it might be a hobby. A lot of passions are hobbies. And it also might graft into something that becomes what I might call a professional hobby. That is a hobby that pays for itself, a hobby that generates revenue. And then might morph some more from just a professional hobby to a profession. And I think a lot of people are looking at live video production now as a way to, well, to start out with a passion, like my friend that wants to show people how to build shoes. But he also wants to monetize it. He also wants to make it make money because I think he thinks, and I agree with him, that we're not talking about his neighborhood now. We're talking about the entire world is available to him at the snap of a finger on the internet. Just like you're watching this show, whether it's live or recorded. You're watching it because you've chosen to watch it, not because you flicked on the TV and it just happened to come on. In fact, I thank you for choosing me. And if I bore you, just turn me off. But VidBlaster and to some small, to another extent, Wirecast and vMix are beginning to create this whole new industry of people that have passion that would like to take their passion and share it with others. Now, some people do a terrible job at it. It's horrid. What was it? I was watching a show the other day, and one of my, the style that I've chosen for this show is you don't see much of anything. You see me. You see the graphics I put behind me. You see the lower third in front of me. If I run a video, you see that. If I've got a guest, you see that. But you don't see necessarily, the studio look. A lot of folks are kind of coming from a radio background, and so you'll always see that microphone stuck in there, and they're talking on the microphone, or they got their headset on, and then so they're kind of coming into this game from radio. And I didn't choose that. I'm not a radio guy, so I wouldn't choose that. And so I very carefully had to choose a microphone, sits right up here just out of the shot, that will pick up my voice and do a good job with it. I do have earbuds in so that I can hear any video that's playing. I resist the urge to put speakers in front of me because I don't want to get any feedback. But I want the visual here to be, hey, it's me and you. And I'm making eye contact with you, and we're having a great conversation. Well, I'm having a great conversation. You're listening and probably saying things that, of course, I can't hear. Unless, of course, you're in the chat room watching live. Then we're glad to have you with us in chat today. It's great to see everybody over there. And that's the beauty of live, is that it really is a two-way conversation in a lot of ways. So VidBlaster and its colleagues are kind of birthing this whole industry that's coming out. And you might recognize the name of Leo Laporte. He's the first guy that kind of made it big in this way. He's a $1 million man right now. There are other folks that are beginning to push up. They've pushed down roots, and now they're beginning to push out branches. Andrew Zarian with the guys from Queen's Network up in New York. Not only is he doing his own shows, but he's producing other shows, and this is his full-time gig. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Another guy up in Pennsylvania, Stephen Haywood with the Tech Buzz, is doing his own shows and beginning to produce others and kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. And then we see some folks that are kind of thinking, okay, well, this whole industry, whatever we're going to call it, we still haven't come up. I haven't found a name that I like. Webcasting, yeah, that's good. Internet broadcasting, yeah, that's good. But there's got to be a word that incorporates it a little bit better. That I'm distracted by a chat post here. Sorry about that. I need to get a big monitor in front of me so that I can look at the camera and read the chat at the same time instead of look down and become distracted by the folks that are chatting away. This industry has begun to spin off two things: people who are developing products on their own for this industry, and manufacturers who've always been in the video industry or the audio industry or something like that, and are now seeing this as a legitimate industry and beginning to put products, to design and develop products for that. I watched Stephen Haywood's show yesterday, Broadcast Now. Comes on Tuesday afternoons at, I think it's 6 Eastern. And and he had a guest on the show who was showing off a control surface that he had designed and built himself and was going to manufacture. And it would plug in and control Wirecast and the ATM, I guess it's the ATM 100, and he was also going to get it configured where it would control VidBlaster and vMix, so that one controller would serve all those. And he actually came from an environment where he was using the ATM, the ATEM, the Blackmagic ATEM, and Wirecast at the same time. And so he had two control surfaces, and he wanted to just limit it to one. So he couldn't find one, so he built one. What talent! So that's going to be fun to watch that maturing of that part of the industry. But I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were telling me that they did not believe that Mike Versteeg understood the influence that he has had in this industry, and that his product VidBlaster has really shaped the direction that this industry is going in. There's almost a direct clone of VidBlaster out of Russia. So many of the aspects of vMix were taken from a careful study of VidBlaster. Some of the new features in Wirecast are in response to what's going on with VidBlaster. None of them yet have been able to do one of my favorite features, the slow motion instant replay. But I suspect they will over time. They'll get it figured out and they'll put it in there, and it will be a more common experience. For a long time, VidBlaster was the only one that had a virtual camera, virtual video device that worked. Everybody else's didn't work. Skype changed their rules, and VidBlaster was the only one that worked. I think now Wirecast and vMix have caught back up. But VidBlaster has been a real trailblazer in a lot of ways on that. Now, trailblazing is good and it's not so good, because trailblazing, sometimes you can go down the wrong trail. You can go down a trail that you think is going to lead to gold or a river or something exciting and useful, and it ends up being a dead end. Whereas everybody that comes after you can say, oh, that trail doesn't go anywhere. We're not going to waste time going down there. So trailblazing cannot be the most efficient way to develop a product. But I think trailblazers like Mike Versteeg, they can't help themselves. Their nature is to strike out where nobody has. I mean, when I say strike out, I don't mean strike out like in baseball strike out. I mean strike out like in a trailblazer strikes out on a journey. They can't help but strike out on a journey because that's just their nature. They're going to go and discover, and in this case, create things that haven't been created before. And I think that's the joy that Mike gets in the job is coming up with all these new crazy ideas and saying, well, if A and then B, why not C? And so he creates it, and then 5 years later, it's an industry standard. It's really exciting to be associated with VidBlaster and to watch all this. I've been associated with VidBlaster since February of 2009. So that makes 5 years. And in those 5 years, I've seen a lot of changes and a lot of great changes. Some have been dead ends. Yeah, that's going to be the nature of trailblazing. But some have been really, really good stuff. And I expect that that's going to continue. It's going to be interesting. I mean, well, the Mac thing is going to hopefully take the same kinds of things and incorporate them on the Mac side. But there's so many ways that VidBlaster can explore new territory and kind of retread old territory and make marked improvements in it. For example, and we talked about this a little bit in our end of the year show back in December. You can go back and watch that when it's on YouTube. If Mike were to decide that he wanted to begin to use the PC's video card, the GPU, if he was going to begin to use some of that GPU horsepower for processing video in VidBlaster, which VidBlaster now uses only CPU to do that. Wirecast and vMix use the GPU. How they discovered to do that or how they chose to do that, I don't know. That's just the way they were created. VidBlaster wasn't created that way. But I think VidBlaster would benefit greatly from being able to use the GPU to do some of its processing. Some of the criticism of VidBlaster as a CPU hog come from the fact that VidBlaster uses the CPU to handle and process all of the video. So if that one change were to be made, oh my goodness, look out. The other thing that I think VidBlaster could look at and possibly begin to, I don't know that it improve itself, but to take a step up would be to incorporate its own encoder. Right now, if you want to use an encoder with VidBlaster, most folks use the free Flash Media Live encoder. That's a free download from Adobe. Today, we're actually using the encoder in Wirecast to encode and stream this broadcast. We're encoding it and streaming it to 2 different locations. So if VidBlaster were to license and incorporate its own encoder, I think there would be a strength in that, especially if it were something that took in the new X264, I think it is, and then there's the new H265, which is supposed to be 4 times as good as H264. Whereas the compression, and boy, I'm in the deep end of the pool when we start talking about this. But the amount of compression that's applied is done using less CPU and maintaining more detail so that you end up streaming a more compact file, meaning you use less bandwidth, and in addition to using less bandwidth, you use less CPU resources. So you get more for less. Boy, that's a deal. And to incorporate an encoder like that into VidBlaster would be lights out. I think Telestream is working on that, an H.265 encoder for Wirecast. I'm not sure if there's one in FFmpeg. If anybody in the chat room knows the answer to that, I'd love to know it. But that's a project that I've put on the shelf, but I was really hot and heavy for a while was to use FFmpeg as an encoder for VidBlaster, and because it's a free encoder. And so we might work on that some during this year. We've about come to the end of our time. Remember, today's a two-segment day, 2 half-hour sessions. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure and pick up our second session. But I'm going to close out this session, and we'll go to intermission here for a second. And I think I'm just going to run our regular credits. So with no further ado, I'm going to close out this show. And if you're watching live, stick around for just a few minutes. We'll start another show. And if you're watching us on YouTube, by all means, pop into the next show right below this one, and you can see it then. Thanks. Take care.